A career in coffee is a lot like this moving sidewalk. Stand still, and you fall behind. To get ahead, you gotta hustle. I'm at the airport. Again. After years of travel, I've always felt like airports are some sort of purgatory, like a world between worlds. And for me, even after all these years, it is still pure excitement because it means in just a few moments, I will literally be shot up above the clouds, a perspective that we could have only dreamed about like 200 years ago. And in just a few short hours, I find myself magically in a foreign land. Different weather, strange smells, and cultures sometimes so different from my own that I might as well be on a different planet. Hey everyone, I'm Brody Vissers, and I actually filmed that silly little intro on my last trip, but I am back here in Barcelona now. And the fact of the matter is, over the last 10 years I've been traveling, and people ask me, how do you travel so much? Or how do you work in coffee? What does that even mean? What do you even do? Well, in this video, I'm finally gonna tell you and share with you a few tips for how to travel the world as a barista and get paid for it. So I call it the Nomad Barista, and I want to give you, let's say, 5 tips to put you on a path where you're finally traveling the world for coffee, doing your best to make a positive impact, and basically finding your dream job. Let me explain a little bit. What is the Nomad Barista? My story starts back quite a bit earlier. I was 21 at the time, so 10 years ago, you can do the math. I decided to move to China. I moved there for almost a year in between school semesters. Of course, drank a lot of tea, it's a big thing there, and did a lot of skateboarding and practiced my photography and my video skills. And so that was a really formative time for me. I started getting into the different types of teas that there were, and then eventually into coffee, because I was living in the coffee growing region of Yunnan in a city called Kunming. And then moved back to Canada and started to get to know some people there. I was living in a city called Hamilton at the time. Some of you watching may know a guy named Jesse Driftwood.
YouTube isn't for filmmakers.
Jesse Korgama, amazing filmmaker, and he was the one that I always attribute to introducing me to specialty coffee for the very first time. So I was hanging out with him and his friends in his apartment, and he was always brewing, you know, a Chemex from a single origin. I didn't really understand what all of that meant at the time, but using scales, using special boilers and kettles, and also working with local specialty coffee. So I felt like it was so interesting. I could travel the world just by grabbing a different coffee bag off the shelf. And so I remember that very first sip of Ethiopian coffee from a local roaster called Detour, which still is very much in action. And that's what kind of turned me on to the whole journey of discovering specialty coffee for myself. So over the next few years, you know, I would go on trips to Europe. I would learn about espresso culture, because coming from North America, espresso was kind of new. Going to Europe, it was a tradition. It was part of the everyday coffee scene, and so I learned a lot traveling. It was back in 2016 where I finally started the Nomad Barista blog and eventually moved to Barcelona for the first time. But I'm gonna get to that in a little bit more detail in just a second. But yeah, one thing led to the next, and here I am today. So stick around to the end, by the way, because what I'm gonna do is share with you a quick list of different coffee jobs or types of coffee professionals that I think lend their way to working and traveling the world for coffee. But first, tip number 1, you should focus on answering the question, how do you want to contribute to the coffee industry? What do you want to do in coffee? What do you love about coffee? And what kind of change do you want to be a part of? So in my case, what drew me to coffee in the very beginning was how connected it was to so many of my other passions. You know, whether it was design, interior design, urban design, or travel the world, take a bag off the shelf. You can travel to Ethiopia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Mexico, wherever you want to go. But also it was a marriage of science and art all at the same time. It was hospitality. So it just linked to so many things for me. And I personally knew from a very young age that I wanted to be working and living in an international context. So, you know, to explore the unknown, to connect with a diversity of different cultures and peoples and backgrounds and geographies. I didn't know it at the beginning that it was going to start to become my career, but everything that I pursued was kind of through that lens. So for you, you might not know exactly how you want to contribute in the industry, but it's good to set some sort of goal at first, to have a little bit of that North Star, because that's going to help you give direction. It's going to help you to know what to say yes to, but also what to say no to, right? Because a lot of times your success comes from more what you say no to and how you guard your time and your energy. But of course, in the beginning, you do probably want to start saying yes to more things just to learn what you like and what you want to be a part of. And so, I've filtered a lot of my endeavors in coffee through the lens of what do I want to do to contribute? How do I want to live my lifestyle? And so I've kind of sacrificed other aspects of, maybe it was financial or maybe it was geography, and I've chosen to be working in a setting or working on projects that are more meaningful to me, but that might look different to you. All right, so now that you're a little bit more clear on how you want to contribute in the coffee industry, it's time to start contributing. But even before you're called upon, even before the opportunity presents itself, because of course, in any new space, new industry, anything new that you're going to be trying, it's going to be obvious that you're lacking some skills, you're lacking experience, and also credibility, right? So if you've never worked as a barista or you've never worked in coffee, you don't have anything to show, now would be a great time to just start creating. This may look like a blog or a social media account all about coffee, but there's many of those these days. So think about, if you want to do that, that's a great idea, but think about how you can set yourself apart from all the other accounts that are making coffee related content. What are you going to do to stand out? What are you going to do to offer something different down the road? Could be something in person as well. Maybe it's a coffee cupping in your local community. Maybe you live in a small town, there's not that much access to specialty coffee. Host some cuppings, or maybe you live in a bigger city, there's a bunch of cafes and you want to do a curated coffee tour. That's a great way to start contributing, but it might be even a little bit more ambitious than that. Maybe it means going and visiting a coffee farm. So let's say you want to go on vacation, instead of going to Disneyland or wherever you might typically go on vacation, maybe you can go to a coffee farm and bring your camera and bring your notepad and just create a story there, create some photos, give it back to the producer or the community there. And that is a really great way to start getting the ball rolling, getting your content out there, if content's your thing, or at least making those connections. And so in my case, back in 2016, as I mentioned, it did involve actually starting a blog. This was the nomadbarista.com. I knew I was going to be doing a bunch more traveling that year, but instead of just doing the typical, go to this really famous site or touristy place, take the same photos as everyone else, I decided I wanted to bring a project with me that was unique to me, that it was something that could guide my trip, and that was coffee. But instead of just going to different cafes and here's some beautiful latte art, or this one has a single origin Ethiopia, I decided to go a little bit deeper and interview the owners, sometimes even the baristas, and tell a little bit more of their story. What brought their cafe or coffee project to life? Where did their passion come from? And put that together in a blog format. So that really helped me to learn a lot. And then over the years evolved from just writing in photos to this YouTube channel, which you're watching right now. So if you haven't subscribed, now would be a great time to do so. I can make more of these videos, do some more coffee travels, but I think it's time for a coffee. And so speaking of traveling the world, drinking coffee, that is where this video sponsor really comes in handy. Of course, WACACO. This is the Nanopresso. Maybe some of you have seen it before. This is what I bring on basically all of my travels. This or some of their other brewers, especially when espresso is basically nowhere to be found or very hard to come by, such as a coffee farm or even on an airplane. Maybe some of you have seen those videos, but I like to bring this thing on board, and I'm just going to show you very quickly how it works. This is around 8 grams of coffee, so it's kind of like a nice little single shot here. Usually I like to just level it off. If you have the tamper, you can tamp it down too, but it works very simple in a pinch like this, and then we'll pop that on here. And so by getting one of these, I honestly feel like it's such a great way, an affordable way for refining your barista skills at home. Let's say you've got a Nanopresso, or even the later edition, the more professional model, the PicoPresso, which I bring on a lot of my travels with me. I believe it's a really great way to refine your barista skills without spending thousands of dollars or euros or yen on a huge single group espresso machine for your countertop. If you have that, that's great as well, but this is just a more affordable way and also much more portable way to work on your espresso skills. So you just literally pop the water in there, pump it out, and we're gonna get espresso in just a second. So either the Nanopresso or the PicoPresso, if you refine your skills on those, it's gonna really lend way to our third tip, perfecting your craft, learning how to be a barista. So if you do want to travel the world working in coffee or working coffee in any sense, I do recommend finding work as a barista, specifically in a high volume environment. So let's say a cafe with a lot of traffic, it's going to get you behind the machine, it's going to get you responding to different things, understanding what it means to work on the front lines, as we call it. So this is basically the closest point of contact that you're going to have in the industry to the end consumer, right? So you're talking to people all day long, you're getting a sense for what they like, what they dislike, and I think even more importantly, when it comes to communication, it helps you refine the way that you educate the end consumer. Some people want to know a lot about the coffee they're drinking, others want to know considerably less, and it's important for us as baristas to be able to read the person right as they walk up to the counter. So instead of shoving information down their throats, maybe it's more about, hey, this is this specific coffee, try it. Try it with milk and sugar if that's what you're used to. Or you'll find that people eventually drink a coffee and they're like, this is the third time I've tried your coffee and I actually don't feel it needs milk and sugar. One of the happiest moments that a barista can have in their career, I think. But little side note here, if you're interested in learning a new language, working as a barista in the country which speaks the language that you're interested in learning is a really, really quick hack to get a sense of a new tongue. So that's what I did when I first moved to Barcelona back in 2016. I was hunting for a job as a barista, so it taught me a lot of Spanish, Catalan, and of course I could use my English when needed. So that was a very quick way to practice my Spanish, but it also happened to lead to my first photography gig in Barcelona. So I was doing photos for the cafe, for their social media, making coffee. It was basically my dream job at the time, and it set me up for where I am today. I started consulting other cafes that wanted to incorporate specialty coffee into their offering. And one last example really quickly of my first barista gig abroad was a few years later. I was living back in Toronto. It was around 2018, and I got a call to go travel to China for a very, very short stint. It was around 5 days, but because I had already my Chinese visa, I had a sense of the culture, the language, it was a very easy jump in. So that's just an example of how you can prepare yourself for future opportunities that might not seem that obvious at the time. And so it just so happens that that project in China led to some really great networking, building contacts, and some awesome projects down the road. So that would be my fourth tip, is to go attend coffee events. I would say start with at least 3. It could be world events like World of Coffee in Europe or the SCA, Specialty Coffee Association Expo in the US, but they could also be local events. I know some larger cities have their own coffee festivals, or even smaller cities, maybe you're from a small town. Try to look for something nearby, because these are literally global events, some of them the biggest in the world, where people are traveling the world for coffee. They're traveling around the world to participate in the coffee industry in different forms, whether it's for coffee gear, equipment, or green coffee, producers, farmers, even coffee roasters. So this is where I would definitely start, because you're gonna just, through osmosis, you're gonna meet a lot of people who are doing what you are planning or hoping to do, which is travel the world working in coffee. And so what I would suggest is go there, meet a bunch of people, make some contacts, take it one step further. Maybe start with volunteering. See if you can volunteer for maybe a barista championship, or work on the brew bar, or what's really common at these events are actually what's called usually the roasters village, or some sort of area where roasters from all over, they'll come and brew their coffee. So if you go there, meet a few people, you could say, hey, look, I'm willing to volunteer. I worked as a barista for a little bit, or I make coffee at home, and here's my project, here's my social media, or here's my blog, and show them that you're passionate about coffee. I think that there's going to be a great opportunity there for you to start working. And I wouldn't always suggest do a bunch of free work, because it doesn't always lead to paid work. But when you're first starting out, I did a lot of free work just to get my feet wet, my foot in the door, and to meet people and get some experience. So I do suggest volunteering. I actually made a video earlier this year while I was in Dubai, the World of Coffee Dubai, talking all about why you should attend a coffee event. So if you haven't seen that yet, I'll leave it at the end of this video. You can check it out or in the description. But that is a really great way to start getting a sense of how you could travel the world for coffee as well. And so for my last tip here, tip number 5, I highly suggest that you go and visit a coffee farm. Now, I understand that that is not as attainable as maybe some of the other tips that I gave already. It's a little bit higher barrier to entry, but I don't think it's impossible. In fact, you know, a lot of the coffee producing countries, in fact, all of them by default are tropical countries. They're vacation destinations. And so maybe you can work that into your next trip, into your next vacation. And if you don't have any connections there, a lot of these producing countries are actually offering tours now. So farm tours are offering even sometimes cabanas or, you know, little resort stays on the coffee farm. If you know any, leave them in the comments. I don't have any specific ones because all the farms that I visited were through mutual connections. But if you've ever been on one, leave it down there for someone to explore on their own. But I think that's a very good way to start to understand and learn a lot more about the coffee industry itself. I cannot stress how eye-opening it was for me to finally visit a coffee farm. My first visit was in Mexico. I'll leave that video at the end of this one as well, so you can check it out. A long time ago, and I thought I knew about harvesting. I thought I knew about the difference between washed process and natural process. You can see all the photos, you can read all the blogs and the books, but being there in person, you understand it differently, and you get to connect with the real people behind the scenes, right? So just understanding their lives, their lifestyles, and what they're pushing towards, their goals, their dreams as well, and how it all links together. So if you do want to incorporate farm visits into your work with coffee, I believe that's very highly possible, but there are a few more steps that you're going to need to take before you get to that point. And so here's a quick list of different coffee jobs that I feel best lend their way to eventually traveling the world for coffee and getting paid for it. So number 1 would be photography and video. That's kind of how I started, and it's becoming more and more popular. What about coffee green buyer, going and buying green coffee, product sales, so coffee gear, going to different trade shows, maybe even a barista competitor, right? Traveling to different competitions, or an event barista, same kind of thing, but serving coffee around the world. And then the last one, maybe consultant, right? And that can take many different forms, but also involves travel. So if you can think of any more, leave them down in the comments, and I'm very curious to hear more of what you do in the coffee industry. I'm going to be making a whole other series about different types of coffee jobs, going a little bit more in depth. So subscribe if that's something that you're interested in. But in the meantime, check these videos right up here, and I'll see you in the next one.